What's up guys, and welcome back. Today on Trent's Garage, we are going to be attempting to reassemble this motor. So I have a Toyota Tacoma, it's a 2005. I have the 1GR, which is the Toyota 4.0 V6, and I tore it completely down. I took the block and the crank to a machine shop. I had them bore it, I had them hone it. They did a polish on the crank. Everything is looking amazing. I've got my full rebuild kit. Really all I need now is some time and some hard work to assemble this motor, and today we're gonna see if I can actually do it. So if you guys haven't caught one of my videos before, I am not a professional engine rebuilder or builder. I've basically rebuilt 2 engines before in my life. One of them worked for about a month. The other one worked for years and years. So this is gonna be my 3rd attempt. I think I'm doing everything right. If you guys have some tips or things that you think I should change or I should have done differently, I'd love to hear them in the comments. This video goes out usually a few days after it's filmed, so if there's things I can go back and change because it's a big deal, I definitely will. But I enjoy all of your guys' input and all of your guys' feedback. It really helps kind of direct me and let me know whether I'm doing things right or wrong, because a lot of you guys have more experience doing this than I do. But I'm about to pull the cover off of this engine. We're gonna throw it on the engine stand, and I'm gonna clean it and start preparing it to put the crank in. I gotta get the crank bearings and everything set. This is gonna be a fun day.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing?
Hi, Nika. Good, how you doing?
Pretty good.
Got you a present.
Oh yeah, what's that?
Coffee.
Oh, you got an extra one?
Yeah, they made a hot one.
Oh, really?
And I said, I don't want that. So, well, you got anyone that'll drink it? I said, yeah, my boss might drink it.
Nice. Thank you, sir.
It's probably not very hot anymore. It's been like an hour.
What is it?
Just my drink.
Nice.
How is it?
It's pretty good.
Is it better ice? That's the question.
Yeah, probably.
I don't think I've ever had a hot one. So I don't know.
I'm not at all surprised by that.
Actually, when you break in a motor, you're not supposed to use synthetic.
Really?
Yeah, because synthetic is like, my understanding of it is that synthetic is like such a high protection for lubrication that like when you're breaking in a motor, you want to like kind of seat the bearings and do a bunch of stuff that you need kind of like regular engine oil for. My understanding of it has been when you break in a motor, you put in just regular cheap non-synthetic or synthetic blend motor oil. You drive it for like 500 miles or 1,000 miles, I think like 500 miles, and then you drain that oil and then you can put in synthetic. But I don't know, that's just kind of some stuff I read on the internet, so I don't know if that's actually true or not. It's really interesting because like the first time I was rebuilding an engine, we had the internet, but it was like pretty basic, and like I remember like forums that I could read stuff on and like try to gather some information about the rebuild that I was about to do. But now there's so much more information, and there's like YouTube and YouTube how-tos and like tutorials and all these different things. Like the amount of information and the access to that information is vast now compared to when I first rebuilt an engine. So hopefully that means this engine's gonna turn out better than my first one. I think we're gonna get started. We're gonna throw this block over here on the engine stand and get to work. Say I'm nervous would be an understatement. I think it's gonna turn out fine. I think everything's gonna be okay, but it still does not mean I'm not nervous.
For us to make it through the night, stormy weather, weary eyes, hope to make it through the night.
Those wrenches are just so you don't over tighten things.
It's like when you're dealing with machines and machined parts, like everything that is built that goes together has like a specified clamping force that it needs. And especially with like bearings and stuff like that, if it's not tight enough or too tight, it will cause excessive pressure or not enough pressure, and then there'll be like slop, so the machine will just come apart because like you're dealing with immense centrifugal force, and like anything that's out of balance or not clamped down properly will have issues. But also every little teeny part and every screw that goes into an engine has a torque specification, and if you don't torque it down, it can either be too tight and fail, or it can come out or do whatever. So it's best to just get the manual, follow all of the torque settings, and make sure that everything is to spec. And then if something goes wrong, at least you know that you torqued everything properly, and whatever went wrong might have been out of your control.
That's what you tell yourself.
That's what I tell myself. That's what I tell everybody else too. This makes me kind of nervous. I have this DNJ master rebuild kit, came with bearings, pistons, everything. I know it's not like the highest quality rebuild kit or components that I could use, but the main bearings don't have this little claw. There's like normally like a little bearing tooth that sticks out that goes into this groove right here. And then when the cap comes down, that claw kind of hits against the top cap, and then there's a claw also on the cap bearing that pushes down on this part of the block. And that makes it so that you can't spin a bearing. These don't have that claw. I know that these bearings are for this engine, but why don't they have the claw? That little hole right there should have like a little metal piece sticking out in it. I'm gonna call Dave from the machine shop and just ask him if he knows what I'm dealing with. Is this Dave?
Yeah, it is impersonating. Yes.
I had a question for you. I'm assembling this motor right now, and I got the main bearings out and I'm putting them into the block, and the factory bearings have that little tab on it that like prevents the bearing from spinning and like aligns it. And these DNJ bearings don't have that tab. Is that a problem?
A lot of them don't have them anymore.
Okay, so it's not...
The only thing that keeps them in place is the crush on the cap when you go ahead and install them.
Okay, and it's not gonna spin on me, you don't think?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, I trust you.
Okay, not
All
a
right.
problem.
Thanks, Dave, I appreciate it.
How's your snow up there?
Oh, you know, like 8-9 feet deep. Alrighty, I'll start slapping this thing together. I'll let you know how it goes.
Okay.
All right, thanks,
for
Dave.
calling.
Yep, appreciate it.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, well, I guess a lot of manufacturers are doing away with the tangs. He called it a tang, which is different than that orange drink, but no tangs on these bearings. So this is assembly lube, which is like more of a modern way of putting the engine together. In olden days, I think, you would kind of just rub oil on all of the bearing surfaces, because what happens is when you first start this engine up for the first time, there's not going to be any oil on these bearing surfaces. You're going to have like metal on metal contact like immediately until the oil pressure builds up. That's really bad for the engine.
It looks like Nickelodeon slime.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
That's funny.
That side.
Hey!
We're twinners today. I got black pants on too.
That's right. Are those the same pants?
Yep.
Don't point it out. All right, now I've got my torque wrench out and I'm about ready to start torquing down my main bearing cap bolts. Now there's 4 bolts per cap, which is actually really beefy. A lot of cars only have 2 bolts per cap. And there's actually girder bolts which hold the caps in place as well. Like, there's no wonder that these motors last for, 2, 3, 400, 500,000 miles, is because Toyota builds them to be very strong and very resilient. But there's this proper torquing sequence that you have to go through that like spiders and stars back and forth through the inside set of bolts and the outside set of bolts, and you get them all down to the proper torque specification. And then these bolts are stretch bolts, which means once you get them all to the proper torque specification, then you go and you tighten them 90 degrees past that torque specification. That's what the manufacturer calls for. So I'm gonna start with this special torque sequence, and it's kind of crazy because if you just tighten things in whatever order that you want, it will actually have like awkward, weird pressure on it. So like when you don't torque things in the proper specification, you'll have premature bearing wear, the motor can fail, all different types of stuff. So this is a very important part. Now I've torqued everything in the proper sequence to 45 foot-pounds, and now I'm supposed to rotate a 90-degree turn past that torque setting in the same sequence. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now.
I can tell you want to yell.
I'm not trying that hard. I'm trying to be precise. Yeah!
There it is.
Happy?
Oh, yeah, thank you.
The torquing sequence on the main cap bolts is done. Hopefully it's done correctly. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. We got our caps in the right spots. I think after I put all those in, now it's time to put the girder bolts in. Hopefully I wasn't supposed to put those in before I torqued it. Things are about to get real. I have some Brian Crower rods. These are I-beam rods that are a lot stronger than the factory rods, and I need to install those on my new pistons with my new wrist pins, get all of that assembled, then take my new rod bearings, put them on the rods, and install them in the crank. I gotta put all the piston rings on. Basically, this is all just gonna be a little nerve-wracking because it's all very, very important that it's all done properly. And I'm gonna have to be checking the manual like every 2 seconds. Jeez, that just scared the crap out of me.
Oh, wow.
Siri's speaker's broken. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
That sounded really bad. Anyway, I don't know why Siri was listening, but I'm really nervous about getting this stuff installed. The piston rings and the pistons and everything have to be installed all perfectly to specification. And hopefully I can do this without messing it up. So the factory rods, you can see how this part is in cut really far. The factory rods are just that in cut piece, so they're very, very thin. This has like these giant gussets on each side that makes it an I-beam or an H-beam. I think it's an H-beam is what they call it. And it makes it much wider and much stronger so that you have much less likelihood of bending a rod if you like pre-detonate or something like that. So this is the factory rod, and this is the H-beam forged rod from Brian Crower. Very different, and this one's actually lighter. I mean, this one has a bearing in it still, but it's cool. So this is a piston ring compressor. Basically it squeezes all the piston rings down so that you can tap this into the block. Because if not, all those rings that were sticking out when you try and push them in, you'd be like trying to fool with them. So I got all 6 pistons onto all 6 rods. I've got the piston rings into one of the pistons, and I think instead of like putting the rings in all of these and then trying to install them one by one while they all sit here, I've got the one installed so that the rings don't move around. I put the piston ring compressor on there. I'm gonna pull the rod out, put the bearing on, and install it into cylinder number 1.
Cool.
The pressure is building.
What do these things do? These circles?
These are rod bearings, just like the crank bearing, but it goes on the rod. And basically, you have your rod like journal size, and then you have the crank rod size. and these are machined to a specific distance so that you have the perfect amount of gap in between there for oil. So these, like, if you have to regrind your crank or change the size of the journals or something like that, then you order different sized bearings. So this is like an interchangeable part that you can get in different sizes, because if something happens and you have like a rod knock or something, it'll damage the crank and make it so that you have to grind it so that it's perfectly round again and doesn't have any marks. And then that gap between the rod and the crank will be bigger.
Okay.
So you put a bigger bearing in there. All right, so this is really exciting. It's going together quite well. I'm just like really nervous because I won't really know if I mess anything up here until like probably months down the road when this engine is in the truck and we're starting it up and I'm driving it around for the first time or the first couple thousand miles. It could develop a catastrophic issue. So there's a lot of like pressure and stress that goes along with this today, but it's also very fun and very exciting, and probably nothing else I'd rather be doing right now.
Easter Jeep Safari's in like 2 weeks. You gonna make it?
Yeah, that was like my original estimation, is like, I'll get this truck built and have no problem making it to Easter Jeep Safari. Maybe next year. We're gonna be going to Easter Jeep Safari. I have a friend who builds buggies, and I might be like renting one of his buggies and going to Easter Jeep Safari, or trying to rent some other rig. So we've got plans to go down and like wheel and have fun and meet up with some people, but probably not gonna be in the Toyota. Well, we've spent the better half of the day trying to get all of this stuff assembled, and it's actually going together quite well. I got all 6 pistons, all 6 rods, and the crank in, completely torqued. Everything's ready for the next step, which is put the heads on, do the timing chains. Actually, I think the next step is the rear main oil seal, but I'm making a lot of progress. I think that is probably gonna do it for us here today. If you guys enjoyed watching this video and you're excited to see how the rest of this build goes together, make sure you guys subscribe. And if you guys are enjoying it, make sure you show me by giving me a big thumbs up on today's video. I wanted to say thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys on the next one.